Welcome to the Deep Dive, your shortcut to being well-informed. Today, we are kicking off a focused series, the Sea Breeze Scent Deep Dive. And this first one, our inaugural deep dive, is titled Damask Rose.
Yeah, it's really the perfect place to start for anything fragrance-related. When you think about high perfumery, there's really no ingredient with more history or, frankly, more cost associated with it or more complexity than the rose, specifically the Damask variety.
Absolutely. So our mission today is to really take a comprehensive look, across different fields at the Damask Rose, or its fancy name, Rosa Damascena var, Trijinta patella,
Right.
and try to understand this whole network of history, chemistry, art, and also just the brutal agricultural timing that keeps this ingredient so central even today.
That's it, exactly. The sources we looked at make it so clear. You really can't understand the rose just by smelling it.
Yeah.
You have to see it as this meeting point for almost everything.
Like what specifically?
Well, like you said, botany, history, art, gastronomy, literature, agriculture, economics. It touches all of them. It's this botanical marvel. And we're going to explore how human ingenuity, especially in this one particular place, Isparta, in Turkey, transforms this, simple-looking pink flower into these fragrance materials that are literally worth more than silver.
Wow. Okay, so let's dive into that history first then, because this isn't something new in perfume, is it? It goes way, way back.
Oh, ages back, yeah. If you look at the history, the journey of the rose is, well, it's fascinating. Distillation, making rose products, started really early, maybe even the first few centuries CE.
Right.
But back then, the focus was pretty much entirely on rose water.
Just the water.
Yeah, just the water initially. This method, basically soaking the petals and gently getting the essence out, it probably started in Persia. And rose water, or gulab, as it's known there,
Sure.
It became, essential. Part of rituals, daily life, everything.
But there's a big difference between rose water and rose oil, right? The concentrated stuff.
Huge difference. And that's where you see this big technological jump. Rose water is ancient, but the actual concentrated oil, the stuff we think of as essential oil today, that's much, much later.
When are we talking?
It's usually credited to the Mughal Empire in India, right around 1612, give or take.
Wow.
Yeah, imagine the difference that made. Suddenly, fragrances could be so much more intense, last so much longer. It was a total game changer for how people used scent.
And the plant itself, the Rosa Damascena, it's not native to just one place either, is it?
No, not at all. Biologically, it's a hybrid. It's got ancestors from Europe, like Rosa gallica and Rosa moscata, but also species from Central Asia and northwestern China. It's basically a mix.
A well-traveled flower.
Exactly. A migrant flower carrying the history of Eurasia in its genes, you could say, and then its cultivation spread west. It got introduced into Ottoman Bulgaria, the Kazan-like Valley specifically, sometime late in the 17th century.
And that area became huge for rose oil, right? The Bulgarian Rose Valley.
Massive. Became a global center. But interestingly, the Damask rose didn't really get established in what's now Turkey until much later, like late 19th century. The story goes it was around 1894, a Bulgarian peasant apparently smuggled some seeds into Anatolia, saw an opportunity.
Huh. So the Turkish industry is relatively recent compared to Bulgaria's, historically speaking.
Yeah, in the grand scheme of things. But this long history, this ubiquity, is why the rose is so much more than just a nice smell. It hits all five senses, doesn't it? You see it in tattoo parlors, you read about it in poetry, you even taste it in food, and it's been in ancient medical texts forever.
Right, that cultural depth is massive. You mentioned medicine, that connection goes back thousands of years.
Oh yeah. Rose water, specifically, was seen as this kind of cure-all, a panacea, even used as a remedy for depression, apparently for over 2,000 years. It's actually mentioned in the Charaka Samhita.
Which is a foundational text for
Ayurveda, the traditional Indian system of medicine. So really deep roots in thinking about well-being,
And beyond medicine, it was big in hygiene and hospitality, too, especially in the Middle East.
Absolutely crucial. There's that famous story, about the Queen of Sheba visiting King Solomon.
Vaguely, yeah.
Well, one version says she tested his wisdom by bringing two groups of servants, identical looking, and asked him to tell the men from the women.
How'd he do it?
He just asked them to wash their hands. The men supposedly splashed about carelessly, but the women washed very precisely, using a second bowl for a final rinse.
Ah, and that rinse.
That rinse was traditionally scented with rose water. It turns basic hygiene into this ritual of refinement, of purity.
So rose water becomes linked with welcoming guests, purification.
Exactly. And they even had special vessels for it, these beautiful long-necked things called gilabdan or gulabdan.
Wow.
And you even see it in big historical moments, like when Saladin reconquered Jerusalem in 1187. He reportedly ordered the walls of the Mosque of Omar washed down with rose water.
As a purification.
As an act of purification, yeah. Reclaiming sacred space. It carried that much weight.
And then there's the pure symbolism, of course. Love, primarily.
The ultimate symbol. Love, affirmation, forgiveness. The red rose being the big one for passion, right? Mm-hmm. But it's also stood for liberty, achievement, eternal devotion. There's that myth about Cupid spilling wine on the rose's petals, giving the red rose its color.
Linking passion and eternity.
Precisely. That's why it resonates so strongly through centuries of art and literature. It carries all these layers.
Okay, so we have this incredible legacy, this cultural weight. But let's switch gears a bit. Ultimately, for perfumers, it comes down to the smell, which means chemistry. Let's get into the lab, so to speak.
Right. Time for the molecules. And it's important, there are thousands of rose types, but for industrial perfumery, it really boils down to two main species.
Which are?
The Damask Rose, Rosa damascena, which is what we're mostly talking about today. It's a shrub, maybe 1.5 meters high. And the other big one is the May Rose, Rosa centifolia, which is grown a lot in grass in France.
And there's a big difference in how much you get from them, the yield.
Oh, a huge difference. And that impacts everything, especially cost. Take Rosa centifolia, the May Rose, you need about 1,000 kilograms of flowers.
Yeah.
That's a metric ton, just to get maybe 1 to 1.3 kilos of the absolute.
A ton of flowers for just over a kilo of product.
Yeah, it works out to about a 0.13% yield. Sounds incredibly tiny.
It does.
But believe it or not, for a perfumer, getting 0.13% yield for the absolute is actually considered pretty good compared to the oil. We'll get to the oil yield later. It's even smaller.
Wow, okay.
But that difference in yield and how you extract it means you get different products. The absolute gives you a certain profile, maybe fresher, waxier. The oil gives you something deeper, maybe more like jam. Chemistry dictates everything here.
So what are the key chemicals? What makes a rose smell like a rose, chemically speaking, in both these main types?
Okay, so there's sort of a basic scaffold shared components. The big three, you could call them.
Right.
First up is 2-phenylethanol, often just called PEA. That's a primary alcohol. And it plays a huge role later when we talk about how they extract the scent.
Okay, PEA. What else?
Second is geraniol. This one's really critical. It gives the oil its strength, its body. It's a major part of that classic rose character.
Geraniol for strength. Got it. And the third?
Third is citronellol. This gives that typical light, sweet, rosaceous quality, that sort of bright, fresh aspect of the rose smell.
So PEA, geraniol, citronellol, that's the base for both Damask and May Rose.
Broadly speaking, yes. They form the core structure.
So if they share that base, what makes our star, the Damask Rose, different? What gives it that unique signature everyone wants?
That comes down to the trace compounds. The molecules present in much, much smaller amounts, but they have a huge impact on the smell.
A nuanced molecule.
Exactly. These are what give the Damask Rose its specific character, maybe a bit fruity, sweet, sometimes spicy, even a little peppery. We're talking about things like rose oxide.
What does that do?
Rose oxide adds this sort of fresh, green, almost metallic lift. Then there's beta-damascenone. This one's super powerful, even in tiny traces. It gives that warm, almost cooked fruit or jammy quality.
Okay, like a stewed fruit note.
Sort of, yeah. And then you've got beta-ione, which brings in a powdery, slightly violet-like smell. It's the precise balance, the ratio of all these trace things on top of the base that defines Rosa damascena and makes it the gold standard.
It's really amazing that tiny amounts of these extra chemicals make such a huge difference in perception and price. But that sensitivity must create risks, right?
Huge risks, absolutely huge. And that brings us straight to the chemistry of the harvested flower, because timing and speed become everything. If those picked flowers aren't processed almost immediately, you get problems.
Like what kind of problems?
Well, the sources call it non-desirable fermentation. Basically, the flowers start to break down chemically in ways you don't want.
And how does that change the smell, the molecules we just talked about?
It directly impacts that crucial geraniol-citronellol balance. Fermentation causes a natural chemical reaction. Specifically, it reduces geraniol into citronellol.
So you lose the strength molecule and gain more of the sweetness molecule.
Exactly. And remember, geraniol gives the oil body and strength. So if you lose geraniol and end up with too much citronellol, the oil smells greener, weaker, less deep. It loses value fast.
So the resulting oil is thin, maybe a bit sharper green, lacking that rich, warm quality.
Precisely. And other unwanted things can form too, like farnesol and nerol, which just muddy the scent profile further. So literally a few hours delay between picking and processing can be the difference between top-quality oil and something much less desirable.
Which makes the whole agricultural side incredibly high stakes.
Completely, which takes us perfectly to Turkey, where this high-precision chemistry meets the tough reality of farming.
Right, the Rose Triangle you mentioned earlier, Isparta-Burdur. What's special about that specific spot for Rosa Damascena?
Okay, so geography first. This area is high up on the southern part of the Anatolian Plateau. We're talking 1,200 to 1,500 meters above sea level.
That high altitude is important.
It's key. It creates this specific continental climate. You get cold, snowy winters, then hot, dry summers. That combination seems to be perfect for damask roses. Plus the soil there, often loam, limestone, clay loamy stuff, it all comes together to create this unique terroir.
And that terroir helps the flowers produce more oil.
Seems to maximize the volatile oil production, yeah. Makes the flowers richer in scent.
And it's a big industry there.
Oh yeah, significant. Somewhere between 5,000 and 10,000 hectares are planted with roses. That involves maybe up to 10,000 families.
Wow.
Though the individual farms are often quite small, maybe half a hectare to 1 hectare on average. But the plants themselves, the rose bushes, they're a long-term investment. If you look after them well, they can keep producing flowers for 20, even 30 years.
30 years from one bush? That's impressive. But you said the harvest is the tricky part.
The whole year's work, the entire global supply practically, hinges on this incredibly short window. The harvest only lasts about 30 to 35 days.
Just over a month.
Yeah, it usually starts mid-May, all wrapped up by mid-June. And the logistics of getting millions and millions of flowers picked and processed in that tiny time frame, it's just staggering.
And this is where that chemical breakdown becomes a massive issue, right? The race against fermentation.
Exactly. It is literally a race. And this was one of the most surprising details for me in the sources. The flower is at its absolute peak fragrance intensity.
When?
Between 8:30 and 9:00 in the morning, super specific.
Okay.
While the petals are still a bit damp with the morning dew.
Just a 30-minute window for peak perfection?
Apparently so. The urgency is unbelievable. You have to pick the rose, basically, the moment the blossom opens. Because by noon, just a few hours later, the sources estimate it's already lost 30 to 40% of its fragrance.
30 to 40% lost by lunchtime.
Yeah, and if you wait until, say, 8 p.m., it could lose up to 80%. Gone.
That dictates everything about the harvest then. Early mornings, nonstop.
Absolutely. Workers are out there picking by hand. It's delicate work. One person can maybe manage about 5 kilograms an hour. They fill these big sacks, maybe holding up to 20 kilos each.
Okay.
And then those sacks have to get to the distillery. Fast. Often it's a 3 or 4 hour journey from the field to the processing plant. Any holdup.
And the fermentation starts. That reduction of geraniol to citronellol kicks in.
You got it. If a flower picked at 9 a.m. doesn't get processed until, say, 2 or 3 p.m., you're inevitably going to see that chemical shift start. The farmer might deliver the weight, but the oil quality just won't be the same. It'll have that greenness, that lack of depth we talked about.
So a huge amount of pressure on logistics, getting the flowers transported quickly.
Enormous pressure. And while the big established distillers have strict quality control, the sources do mention ongoing issues, especially with what they call peasant oil.
Meaning oil from smaller independent producers.
Yeah, and it can be unreliable. Sometimes it's adulterated cut with cheaper stuff like cottonseed oil, mineral oil, even synthetic fragrance chemicals to bulk it out or mimic a better quality. It's a real risk in the supply chain.
Which is why the big perfume houses probably want really tight control over their sources.
Definitely. They often rely on trusted, integrated suppliers where they can track things from field to drum.
Okay, so the flowers make it through the harvest gauntlet. They arrive at the distillery. What happens next? You mentioned 2 main products, rose oil and rose absolute. How do they make the oil first?
Right, rose oil. The traditional method is hydrodistillation. The simplest way to think about it is like making a very, very intense rose tea.
Okay.
You submerge the flowers in boiling water. The steam rises, carrying the volatile, smelly bits of the rose with it. Then you cool the steam, it condenses back into liquid, and you separate the oil from the water. It's an older method, done in batches.
Sounds straightforward enough.
Well, it's a bit more complex than that because it actually needs a double distillation.
Why double?
Because the first pass gets you the direct oil, but the water left behind the first water still has a lot of water-soluble scent molecules dissolved in it. You can't just throw that away.
Right, still valuable.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you have to redistill that first water. That second distillation gives you a smaller amount of indirect oil, and what's left then is the marketable rose water. The final rose oil product is actually a blend of the direct oil from the first pass and the indirect oil from the second.
Okay, that makes sense. It sounds painstaking.
It is. And the crucial thing here is the yield. It is incredibly low for the oil. We're talking about 0.02%.
0.02%.
Yep. To get just 1 single kilogram of rose oil, you need somewhere between 3.5 and 5 tons of rose petals.
3.5 to 5,000 kilograms of flowers for 1 kilogram of oil.
That's right. And that is why it's so expensive. We're talking around 10,000 euro per kilogram, give or take, depending on the year and quality.
10,000 euros. Okay, that explains the price tag. It's liquid gold, basically.
Pretty much. And interestingly, when the oil is freshly distilled, it apparently has this slightly odd sulfurous smell, almost like a struck match. But that fades after a week or two as it matures.
Has technology improved this at all?
Yes, somewhat. Things like steam stripping came in around the 1990s. Instead of boiling water, they use pressurized steam. It's faster, can increase the oil yield a bit, and because it's quicker, there's less chance for oxidation. It gives a slightly cleaner profile, sometimes sold as Rourke essential.
Okay, so that's hydrodistillation for the oil. Extremely low yield, very expensive. What about the other main product, Rose Absolute? How is that different?
Totally different process. This uses chemical extraction with solvents, not water and steam.
Solvents like hexane.
Exactly. Purified hexane is common. If hydrodistillation is like making tea, solvent extraction is more like giving the petals a chemical wash. It's usually a 2-step process. Step 1 produces rose concrete. You wash the petals with a volatile solvent like hexane. The solvent dissolves basically all the fragrant compounds, including the heavier waxy molecules that don't evaporate easily with steam.
Okay.
Then you evaporate the solvent off, and what's left behind is this semi-solid, waxy substance. That's the concrete.
Right, the concrete. Still not the final product, though.
Step 2 is turning that concrete into the liquid Rose Absolute. You take the waxy concrete, melt it down gently, and then dissolve it in alcohol.
Why alcohol?
Because the fragrant oils dissolve well in alcohol, but the heavy waxes don't. So you dissolve the concrete in alcohol. There's often a specific ratio, like 1 kilo of concrete to 6 liters of alcohol. Stir it really well, often for about an hour.
Okay.
Then you chill it way down, often close to 0 degrees C, maybe even a bit below. The cold makes the waxes solidify and precipitate out. You filter those waxes off, and then you carefully evaporate the alcohol under vacuum. What remains is the pure liquid Rose Absolute.
Oh, okay. So it's a way to get the scent molecules without the waxes. What's the yield like for the Absolute?
This is the crucial difference. The yield for Rose Absolute is around 0.13%.
0.13%, compared to 0.02% for the oil.
Exactly. It's more than 6 times higher yield than the oil.
Which makes it
significantly cheaper. Around 2,100 euro per kilogram, typically. Still very expensive compared to most ingredients, but much more accessible than the oil for wider use in perfumes.
But it's not just the price and yield, right? The smell must be different because the process is different.
Completely different smell profile. And it comes back to that chemical we mentioned earlier, 2-phenylethanol, PEA.
Right. The primary alcohol.
Solvent extraction is really good at capturing PEA. So Rose Absolute contains a lot of it, maybe 60 to 70% PEA in the initial concrete phase, whereas the distilled oil only has about 1 or 2% PEA because PEA is quite water-soluble and tends to stay in the distillation water rather than evaporating with the oil components.
So that huge difference in PEA changes the smell how?
Well, PEA itself has a floral, slightly rosy, honeyed kind of smell. So with all that PEA, the Absolute smells much more floral, maybe a bit waxy or honey-like, sometimes described as fresher than the oil.
Whereas the oil, with less PEA, but more of those other components like geraniol.
The oil is generally considered deeper, richer, maybe more jammy or spicy, intensely rosy in that classic way. They are fundamentally different ingredients for a perfumer, different tools in the palette.
And then there's even more advanced stuff, like molecular distillation.
Yeah, that's taking it another step further into high-tech refinement. Molecular distillation or fractional vacuum distillation.
Sounds complicated. What's the point?
Precision. It's a very gentle process, uses low temperatures and high vacuum, so it doesn't damage the delicate scent molecules. But it allows chemists to separate the Absolute or oil into different fractions based on molecular weight or volatility.
So you could, isolate just the very lightest top notes of the rose.
Exactly. Or just the heart notes, or the heavier base notes.
Yeah.
Or you could use it to remove specific unwanted things, like maybe tiny traces of potential allergens like methyl eugenol, or even just the color if you want a perfectly clear ingredient.
So it's like creating bespoke designer versions of the rose scent.
Pretty much. It gives perfumers incredible control, ensures consistency, safety. It really highlights how this ancient flower is now manipulated with cutting-edge science.
Okay, so we've gone from the field through the chemistry lab, but the impact of the rose goes way beyond just perfume ingredients, doesn't it? It's woven into art, literature.
Oh, absolutely. The sheer difficulty and cost of producing it is kind of mirrored by its immense cultural and artistic significance throughout history. It's inspired artists forever.
Especially in Persian and Ottoman art, you mentioned.
Yeah, it's everywhere. In Ottoman miniatures, for instance, the way someone held a rose often delicately between the thumb and index finger wasn't just decorative. It can symbolize that person's refinement, their intellect, their moral standing.
Status symbol of inner quality.
Sort of, yeah. And then you have incredibly powerful symbolic themes, like the rose and the nightingale, Gul Bulbul in Persian.
That sounds familiar. What's the symbolism there?
It's really deep. The nightingale, the bulbul, is always portrayed as the male lover, utterly devoted, maybe even frantic, in its love for the rose, the gull.
And the rose represents?
The rose is the beloved, sometimes unattainable, sometimes proudly defensive with its thorns. In Sufi poetry, this whole dynamic is often interpreted as the soul's yearning for the divine, for God. The rose, beautiful but thorny, represents the beauty and the difficulty of achieving that spiritual connection.
Wow, that's powerful. And it appears in Western literature, too.
Definitely. You've got Le Romantalose, that famous medieval French poem where the rose is literally the object of the quest for love. And then much later you have things like Saadi's The Rose Garden, the Gulistan from Persia.
What's that about?
It uses the rose garden setting, observations about nature and roses, to teach wisdom and moral lessons through stories and poems.
And maybe the most famous literary rose.
Has to be The Little Prince, right? Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. The prince's own special rose on his planet.
Yeah, so complex, demanding.
Exactly. She perfectly embodies the difficulty, the responsibility, the unique preciousness of love and connection, of being pained. And the rose isn't just historical symbolism. Artists today still use it. The sources mentioned Fatma Bukak.
What did she do?
She used Turkish roses grafted onto the stumps of Syrian rose bushes. A really potent, living metaphor for borders, migration, displacement, resilience.
Using the plant itself as the art. Incredible.
Yeah, and all this depth, this emotional weight, is exactly why rose materials, especially from Turkey, are so vital in the perfume lab. It's often one of the first things apprentice perfumers study.
Why is that?
Because its smell is so complex, but also because it blends so well with almost everything. The combinations are basically infinite. Perfumers see it as a fundamental building block.
A building block.
Yeah, something you can use to support a whole fragrance structure or to add a specific flourish or make it the star. It's incredibly versatile. And it's at the heart of so many perfumes that basically define their eras.
Like which ones? Can you give some examples?
Sure. Let's start way back. La Rose Jacqueminot by Coty came out around 1904, 1906. This was a pioneer, really established that bold red rose type of scent.
What was the innovation there?
It leaned heavily on some key synthetic ingredients that were becoming available. Rhodinol, which is related to citronol, and PEA, that phenylethyl alcohol we keep mentioning. Using those synthetics allowed Coty to create a rose scent that was so powerful, so direct, that people initially found it almost unnatural. It was a big step towards modern perfumery.
Okay, so embracing synthetics for impact. What about later?
Jump forward to 1979. Guerlain's Nehima. This one is often described as an aldehydic rose.
Aldehydic. What does that mean in practice? Like Chanel No. 5?
Exactly that kind of vibe. Aldehydes give that bright, fizzy, slightly waxy lift, like the sparkle in No. 5. In Nehima, the rose itself, which was apparently inspired by Catherine Deneuve, was wrapped in this aldehydic sparkle, along with fruity notes, powdery notes. It was a very modern, abstract take on rose for its time. Hugely influential.
Moving away from just a simple floral smell.
Well,
And more recently.
a great contemporary example is Portrait of a Lady from Frederic Malle, launched in 2010. This is classified as an Oriental Chypre.
Okay, break that down. Oriental Chypre.
So Chypre usually means that contrast between bright citrus top notes and a dark, mossy base, often with patchouli. Oriental adds rich, warm, spicy, resinous elements. Portrait of a Lady takes that structure and loads it with a huge amount of Turkish rose, both the essence, oil, and the absolute.
So a massive dose of rose.
Massive. And it pairs it with tons of patchouli, incense, spices, woods, musk. It really showcases the strength of the rose. It proves that Damask Rose isn't just delicate. It can stand up to and even dominate these really heavy, powerful ingredients. It's incredibly versatile.
It really seems to be. And finally, we can't forget, you can eat it too. the gastronomy angle.
You can, though it's tricky in pastry.
Why tricky?
Because if you use low-quality rosewater or extracts, the flavor can easily become bitter or soapy. It's got a bad reputation in some circles because of cheap products. You need really high-quality stuff and a delicate touch.
So chefs who specialize in it are using the good stuff.
Absolutely. They're often using really pungent, high-quality extracts, probably derived similarly to the perfume Absolute. The sources mentioned Chef Jonathan Blott, who works on pairing that delicate rose flavor carefully.
With what kind of flavors?
Things that complement it, like raspberry, hazelnut, maybe grapefruit. Makes things like rose and sumac macarons, using top-notch rose water in the filling, the ganache. Or soft rose madeleines, where a precise amount of rose extract goes right into the batter.
So the same precious material valued in perfume finds its way into high-end desserts.
Exactly. It shows that same refinement, that same need for quality, translates across disciplines.
It really does tie everything together. Okay, so wrapping this up, we've covered a huge amount of ground.
We really have, from ancient Persia and rosewater all the way to, molecular distillation in labs today. What really stands out, I think, is how it's this blend of intense human effort and precise science.
Yeah.
The fate of this incredibly symbolic flower really comes down to chemistry and timing.
Yeah.
That tiny shift in the geraniol to citronellal ratio, just because of a few minutes delay during harvest up in the Turkish mountains, it changes everything. The smell, the price, the final product.
It is fascinating how something that carries so much emotion, so much art history, it's the symbol of love is also defined by this incredibly rigorous science, this demanding agriculture. That complexity, both chemical and cultural, has to be why perfumers just never get tired of working with it, right? They keep finding new facets.
Absolutely. There are countless ways to interpret the rose, and even after centuries, they're still discovering new angles, new ways to make this absolute queen of flowers feel relevant and exciting.
Well, this has been a fantastic deep dive. If you, listening, want to explore more about the science and art of scent, you should definitely visit sbscent.com.
Thank you for joining us for this exploration of the Damask Rose.
Thank you for listening to my podcast. See you next episode. Bye.